All right, we're back. It's COMP391 and it's week 7, lesson 7, part 2. And I want to quickly do a little demo on animation. Right? So how do we do animation? Because we're going to need to do some animation, simple animations when it comes to playing games and so on. How do I do them? So here's a question. Have you guys ever done Flash animation? Anybody? Well, if you notice, this is our default view. Under our default view, we have all these frames. Take a look. It's actually part of every default view you ever see. And if you notice, it starts off at frame 1 and goes to frame 250, right? This is the span of our animation. Now, I can change the span of our animation for each of our objects. Right now, for this object, which is our cube, 250 frames. I want to move my object from here in my animation to somewhere else. Right? So what do? Well, I got to go to Object, right? And I'm doing this, by the way, in object mode, right? And if you look at different options here, okay, there's different options. I got Join, I got Quick Effects, all this stuff from an object perspective. These are all the things I can do from my object. Down here, there's another thing you can do, right? There's another little menu that comes up, right? My object's still selected, right? But if I go here, I can go to frame, and I can see that there is set start frame, set end frame, set previous range, clear range. I also have playback, audio scrubbing, and so on, right, for my object. But what I really want to do is I want to add a keyframe. So how do I do that? On the left, there's also additional controls, right? So here's relations, parent, objects. We haven't talked too much about animation. And there's also, if you notice, I can add a keyframe. If I hover over it on my animation, you can do it here. I can insert a keyframe by clicking the I button. Now, let me explain what a keyframe is, because if you've never done keyframe animation, think about it as a snapshot. All right, so I take a snapshot of my object in three-dimensional space by taking a keyframe. Keyframes are a snapshot of the object in the condition that it's in, the way it's shaped, its rotation, based on its original location, everything, its location in space, the whole thing. So I want to take a keyframe. I want to click Insert here. I can do that, clicking the Insert button. And now it gives me this other menu that says, well, what kind of keyframe do you want, Tom? Do you want a location keyframe, a rotation keyframe, a scaling keyframe? What information do you want me to capture when I do animations? Or do I want to do location and rotation, location and scale, location, rotation, and scale? Like, what do I want to capture? The more you capture, the more it'll save for you. There's also visual location, visual rotation, and so on. And there's also deltas. The easiest ones to think about is I want to change my location. So let's just use a location keyframe. Now, if you notice, my cube now, there's a kind of like this different color around it, and I've got this bar that's kind of along the left-hand side. I'm starting at keyframe or frame 1. If I want to go, let's say, to the next frame, I want to move something, my object, but I want to move it to another frame. So let's move this to, first I want to move it to frame 10. If you notice, my bar moves to frame 10. I can actually physically move my bar wherever I want. If I want a specific frame, I can kind of click it down here. So I'm going to say, just down here, change to frame 10. Are you with me? So I have 250 frames, moving it to frame 10. Okay, now I want to physically move my object. So let's say I move my object up, right? Okay, now I need to capture another keyframe. So instead of clicking the button this time, I press the I button. So I want to do a location keyframe, and now it's marked. Okay, I want to go to another frame. I want to go to frame 20. Move my button. If you notice, there's a yellow mark here, right? I want to move my object this way, right? I want to press the I button and press location. Okay, good. I want to move to frame 30. There it is. I want to move my object this way in space. Press the I button, right? And press location, right? And now I want to move my frame to frame 40. My scrubber, the scrubber arm, right? My frame 40, I want to kind of go out this way again, right? And I'm going to press I up here, location. Okay, I want to go to frame 50. That's frame 50, right? Move my object down. I move my object down and press I for frame and location. Finally, I go to frame 60. Right, and I want to move it back over here. And what I want to do is I want to swivel it. So now I want to go rotate across the y-axis, let's say 45 degrees. There we go. Okay, like that. That's where it's going to end up. And I want to do that around frame 60. I'm going to press the I button, but this time I want to do location and rotation. So it's both those, location and rotation. Okay, cool. Let's also limit my frames. Like right now, well, actually, I'll play first. Let's play the animation. So there's a play button on the bottom here, and let's try this out. I can move my I'm going to move my playhead back to 0 or 1, right? And then I'm going to play. Let's check this out. How come it rotated it forever? I'll tell you why. Because I didn't capture my rotation. And when it rotated for the first time, by the way, it repeats all the time, right? I didn't capture my rotation. I only captured my location. And when I rotated later, it stayed the way it was. Right? That's why. And that's why there's, in my opinion, you should capture location, rotation, and scaling. So if I change anything, right, then it's captured. See what it is? Very easy. I guess a lot of it, and it waits all this time. These are all the frames it's waiting because there's nothing going on here. I haven't changed anything here. So if I want this to repeat faster, I reduce the amount of total frames. So let's just press stop. Probably press escape. And then see where down here on the bottom it says start frame and end frame. I'm right at the bottom of the screen. I'm going to change my end frame to like 60. So my last frame is the one that I'm changing, right? As an example, so there's a much smaller number of frames. And if when I press play, now it's going to repeat a lot more. Watch. A lot faster. It's going to keep repeating over and over again. And it's doing this in three-dimensional space, right? So if I press escape and change my view, right, as an example, that's not going to change anything. Watch. If I press play, it's still going to do the same pattern that I had, even if my view is different. Look, I can keep rotating my view, and it's going to keep doing my animation by itself. From a simulation perspective, guys, this is awesome. That means you can actually, simulate movement across different frames. Right? Make it jump, make it do whatever you want to do. Okay, cool. This is neat. Let's do another one. So I'm going to File, New. Let's go back to this. This time I'll make it spin. All right, so we'll make it so that, again, I'll pull this number of frames up. We'll reduce the number of frames right away to 60, right? And we're doing 60 frames a second. So it means every second this is what's going to happen. So we'll do a few things. So in frame 0 or frame 1, I'll capture the initial location by pressing the I key. This time I'm going to capture location, rotation, and scale. Everything. Cool. Now I'm going to move this thing to frame 5, let's say. Okay, so frame 5, I'm going to rotate it across the z-axis 10 degrees, right? I'm going to move it to frame 10. Oh, first of all, I capture that. I have to capture the keyframe. Then move it to frame 10, right? And I'm going to do the same thing. Rotate across the z-axis 20 degrees this time, right? And I'm going to scale everything up a little bit. Okay, I'm going to capture that. Capture location, rotation, scale. Cool. And then I'm going to move it to frame 15. Right? I'm going to rotate it across the z-axis 20 degrees. Right? And I'm going to scale it up a little bit more. And I'm going to capture that one. Location, rotation, scale. There. Now I'm going to move to frame 20. And I'm going to scale it down this time a little bit. Rotate it across the z-axis 30 degrees. Right? And I'm also going to physically move locations. I'm going to pop this thing up a little bit, up here, right? And I'm going to capture that thing. You can see how you can get quite complex animations as you, and then by the way, it fills in the keyframes. In between the keyframes, there's keyframes, right guys? So the keyframes are the snapshots. And in between the keyframes is all your tweens, your in-betweens, right? All the in-betweens, all the motion between one keyframe and another, it does it for you. Location, rotation, scale. Okay, let's move it. Let's move it back down. Now this is by frame 20. Let's go to frame 30. Right, move it back down. I make it scale in a lot more, and I'm going to rotate it on the z-axis 40 degrees. Right, and I'm going to capture that. And then you know what? For a bunch of frames, I'm going to make it rotate, just rotate around. Right, so we're not going to do anything else. I'm going to go, you know what? Let's go to frame 40. And rotate it across the z-axis 40 degrees. And I'm just going to capture that, location, rotation, scale. I'm going to go to frame 50. And I'm going to make it grow big, really big, as an example, and capture location, rotation, scale. And I'm going to go to frame 60, the last one. As you can see, as I'm playing around. And I'm going to go back down to, just numerically, let's transform this, because take a look, I can also numerically transform it back to normal. I'm going to go back to 0. I'm going to go back to 0. I'm going to go back to 1, 1, 1. It's back to normal. And so everything goes back to normal. And of course, I'm going to do I, location, rotation, scale, so it captures everything, right? And now when I do that, when I've done those animations, I'm going to run this thing by pressing the play button down here. So there's my answer. I'm going to go up, whoop, up, jump up, move over, jump up, and it's going to keep doing whatever, grow, shrink, whatever I want it to do. Okay, cool. This is cool for animations. You can make it move, you can make objects twirl, you can make them do all kinds of stuff. How does this help us from a physics perspective? How does it help us from a game perspective? Well, the great thing is this little sequence of animation that we just made, you can certainly name it, right? And this little sequence of animations, you can call it, right? So that the sequence does something. When you want to make the animation start off, you can name this animation later on, and we can call it with logic bricks. For now, though, I think we're just going to stop this animation, right? But we can certainly call it whatever we want. We can name this animation whatever we want to name it. Let me go back. I can scrub it too. So I can scrub each of the frames of the animation, even though I've only defined my keyframes. My keyframes are my snapshots, and the machine is going to interpret all the frames in between and draw them and make a transition from one keyframe to the next. That's what it's doing. It's quite neat. Keyframe animation, available in Flash and other kinds of programs as well. They do the same kind of thing. It's keyframe animation as opposed to classic animation. Classic animations, you're still flipping frames, but you're not flipping. You're drawing every single frame. You're not just doing keyframes. So, but there is a thing, an option to do classic tweens in Flash. You can kind of do the same thing. We also haven't talked about easing in and easing out. I can change the easing value of my animation from one keyframe to the other, so it goes right away. It goes there really, really quickly. Or it eases in, it changes the easing value, so it changes the values a lot faster or smoother, or eases in and out, or bounces in and out. There's a whole other scale that you can choose. You can also make your animation linear, so every frame is equal in terms of speed, how it changes and reproportions itself. So very, very cool. Again, all built into our free little tool here, Blender. And I wanted to just end off with that this day.